Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the press briefing of APEC 2015 Senior Officials Meeting Chair, Undersecretary Laura Del Rosario. Undersecretary Del Rosario will brief you on what has been discussed at the recently concluded second Senior Officials Meeting. After this, we will open the floor for your questions.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is second briefing that I'm giving here, and I think some of you might already uh, have heard already about some of the things that I'm going to say today. But let me just review the areas that we covered. We covered, of course, our four priorities, like enhancing regional economic integration. For those of us who might not be familiar yet with that term, REI, or regional economic integration, we actually mean really facilitating the entry of goods and business and making sure that all our rules are aligned. As many investors and businessmen say, it's hard to do business in a region where all the rules and regulations are so different from one another. And therefore, for them, it's easier if all of us are more or less alike. I think this alikeness or alignment is a common problem in all areas of APEC. When we talk about education, also we have to think in terms of how different is, for instance, is Chinese education from American education, and in relation to that, how different is Philippine education, which people always point to as only having 10 years versus the other economies in APEC who have all 12 years. And so I'll go back to the four priorities. They are regional economic integration, human capital development, SMEs participation, regional and global markets, or MSME. We now have adopted MSME, which means micro, small, medium enterprises, human capital development, and building sustainable and resilient communities. Now I'll start with REI. I think the biggest agenda last year was when China proposed that we start negotiating a free trade area for Asian Pacific, something that will cover all of us, so to speak. It is the big game. So if we want to take a look at it, if you have to look at what is happening right now, we have, excuse me, we have the RCEP, which is the Regional Cooperation Economic Partnership, where all the ASEAN countries have FTAs with 6 other dialogue partners. But even these individual FTAs, let's say with India, with China, with Japan, with Australia, New Zealand, they're so different from each other. And because they cover certain areas that other FTAs don't cover. For instance, maybe I'm just giving us an example. With one economy, we might not cover, for instance, agriculture. Or in another economy, we might not cover intellectual property. Or in another economy, we might not cover like what, investment liberalization. So somehow, all these FTAs have their own parameters. They have their own uh, restrictions or limitations in terms of what we want to go with them. Now with REI, we hope that all of us can have something common so that when we talk about rules, more or less we are covered only by, let's say, one general principle. I'm sorry. Okay. There are two activities right now that are happening in the regional economic integration agenda. I think you all know that TPP is being conducted, negotiated by 12 members of the APEC economies, and RCEP is being conducted by 10 ASEAN countries, but including their 6 dialogue partners. What is different, though, is this: some of the economies in APEC, they are negotiating both TPP and RCEP. In the case of the Philippines, we're only negotiating RCEP. And at the same time, in the RCEP, not all ASEAN members are members of APEC, namely Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. And at the same time, one dialogue partner, India, in the RCEP is not a member of TPP. So you can just imagine this, that there are non-APEC members who are negotiating with us, but TPP is just within APEC. That is the big difference. Only APEC economies are in the TPP. Now, if we have an FTA-AP, the ambition was to cover everybody. But one concern is how far can we go and how high can we go? When we talk about breadth and height of negotiations, there are certain things that are sensitive for some economies. For instance, when it comes to investment rules, definitely if you talk about openness of investments, there are economies who cannot go with the arrangements on that, especially those that own state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises, in a way, as perceived by an ordinary person, has an added advantage because it's state-owned. And of course, there are certain countries that have so many funds that their state-owned enterprises might be more competitive, so to speak, than a corporation formed by an ordinary individual or by a group of individuals in one economy. So in a way, that's already an even playing field. So in the economic integration agenda, we're always talking of an even playing field. And then at the same time, we want to know, how about intellectual property? Some of us don't have a very strong implementation of intellectual property protection. And some people have already admitted to us one reason why they don't invest in us, especially companies that do a lot of innovation, is because we don't have a strong intellectual property protection implementation. And I think I can understand that. If you invent something, if you innovate on something, why should you sell it in that economy if you know that somebody will copy it? If you notice, if you look at all the big people, or the big corporations, or even foreign corporations, foreign investors or foreign innovators, when they want to bring about an idea, they go to the United States. Because the United States has a very strong intellectual property coverage, and at the same time, they allow innovation. And I mean, I can think, I don't know if you're familiar with Elon Musk, the one who owns SpaceX and the one who put up PayPal. When he decided to go into SpaceX and to Tesla Motors, from South Africa, he went to Canada. From Canada, he went to the United States. So right now, he's already the person, or his company handles all the other projects that NASA wants him to do. He's that big already. Now, even if you look at Filipino innovators who are in the Silicon Valley, they said they'd rather stay in an economy where they are sure that their ideas are protected. So I'm just giving you an example of these chapters in an FTA agreement, and I think this is one reason why for us, we want to do it step by step. What we have agreed on is we do a collective study, and then we will see what areas we want to cover before we actually start negotiating. Because we have to decide, as I said, how wide and how high are our ambitions and our goals. So that's one. And then, of course, under REI, we're also looking at structural reform. I think this is the common problem for everybody. They said that you cannot really improve anything unless you reform your regulations. China has complained about the middle income trap. Somehow they have achieved a level already of development and they cannot move up. The reason is that many of their economic activities are focused on manufacturing. So once you have reached manufacturing, and let's say you are a manufacturing giant, how do you improve further your quality of life and also the economic activity that you have? Definitely you have to change the rules. You have to improve them. You have to open them. You have to unlock the market, as they say. Of course, some people are afraid of unlocking things or opening things because they think that it will somehow jeopardize the small guys. But for some people, they say if you can do it gradually, if you capacitate, if you build up the capacities of the small corporations, then hopefully they will learn to compete rather than leaving them the way they are without competition, and then later on they do not learn how to improve themselves. Now, with structural reform goes also our own agenda with services. When we discussed already the structural reform ministerial meeting, and we decided that perhaps in the structural reform ministerial meeting, we should put our services agenda there. Now, people will ask, why do you keep on talking about services all the time? Because when it comes to trade, we always think of two sets of things that we trade. We trade in goods, which is really very, very obvious. Like if I'm holding a glass, this is a product that I produce that I can sell. But when I talk about services, it's something that's rendered by a human being that is part maybe of producing a product or which is in itself a product. To give an example is this. Let us say that, this is an example that I often give to people. Let us say that I'm going to produce an airplane. You just don't go to the Boeing plant and then you start manufacturing the tail, the body, the seats, the doors, the engines. Somehow somebody has to design the plane. You want to design the exterior, the interior. You have to get an aeronautical engineer to find out what shape will fly best in the best way possible, taking care of the downdraft and all the wind factors. And at the same time, you also want somebody to design the interiors, to design the fabrics, and you want somebody also to design the engine. Now, design is a service. You cannot manufacture the plane without the industrial designers, without the research on the engine function. So these are services. Now, services are so much part of manufacturing that some people forget that you also need to liberalize services. Like how can you improve a product if you won't allow, let's say, a foreign engineer to help you design your car, for instance? Like, for instance, also, if I want, let's say, to do something creative, or even if it's just, say, movie production, for instance, assuming I don't have the technical know-how and the technological equipment, how can I make a movie production that can compete with a movie production produced, for instance, in South Korea? So for some people, they say we should also open up services. But for some of us in the Philippines, when we talk of services, you usually think only of our doctors and nurses, and lawyers, and how these doctors and nurses will compete. Foreign doctors compete with the locals. We are looking at it beyond that. We're looking at everything, every human activity that can be incorporated in the manufacture of a product. And there was a study done by OECD, which I have mentioned already in my previous briefing, that in the manufacturing of one particular product, they found out that there were 77 services involved. And of course, they did not mention what those 77 services are, but I assume those were 77 different jobs. And in this new age of innovation, definitely services will become more and more important as more and more people will be involved in software development, in design, in innovation, in engineering, in technology, and everything else to make things a little better. So when we also go into services, we also go into the rules of the game, like how much services are you willing to accept, and then which services area are you willing to open. Now, that's one part of it. And then we also, therefore, we think that during our structural reform ministerial meeting during this SOM, they started to talk already about tools to improve regulations and also regulations that can affect the delivery of services. And then in another committee, like in the Senior Officials Committee on Economic and Technical Cooperation, our focus here is on capacity building. You see, capacity building, that's why we also focus on investing on human capital, is the third pillar of APEC. The first pillars are trade and investment facilitation, business facilitation, and then of course, or liberalization. The third one is economic and technical cooperation, which is basically building capacity. Now, why did we do that? In 1996, we knew that if we have to open our markets, we must be able to compete. And to be able to compete, we have to capacitate ourselves, we have to improve ourselves, and this is where the APEC cooperation will come in. As an example, for instance, of a human capacity building program is what Chinese Taipei has decided to do in the Philippines. They open up what we call APEC Digital Opportunity Centers. They train people how to use software, how to use the internet. They focus on the disabled so that now even the blind, the lame, and people with disabilities can find jobs by working with IT, with IT resources or information technology resources. Now, this is just one of them, and I think we're doing a lot. I mean, when we look at the capacity building programs that we have, we're even training people on air control, being to be air controllers. We're training people on weather forecasting. This is how APEC is working, because we know that we are in the Pacific region, the fire, what do you call it, the Pacific Rim of Fire. So we're doing this because we also know that one of our priorities is also to build sustainable and resilient communities. If you have noticed, my briefing really cuts across. I'm not talking in terms of silos, in terms of verticals, but I'm talking about the horizontal way in which we do things. Because after all, business is horizontal. We cannot talk, for instance, about building business unless we talk about building human capital, unless we talk about improving human capital. And so we are happy that there are some economists who want to do, for instance, a study for the labor market to find out where the skills gaps are. There are some industries that cannot fill in the jobs that they need because the talent pool is just not there. And people will always say, oh, we're producing so many graduates every year and they cannot find jobs, and they blame the economy, and they said the economy is bad. But what they don't know is that the economy is good, but perhaps they don't have the skills needed for certain particular companies. During my previous briefing, I've already told people, I mean some members of the press, about how the future looks so differently from the way we know it. I talk about robots off the shelf. If we want to, let's say, attract manufacturing companies here, chances are what they will need will be workers who are good in services. Because manufacturing companies now, they buy robots off the shelf, meaning you can order robots now from other companies so that you don't need those manual laborers on the production floor. What you will need perhaps are quality control engineers, or people who can do good marketing, or people who can really guide human resources, skilling them up so that they can deal with the changes that are happening in production. So we just have to take a look at these new jobs. And I think I already referred to the fact that in 2010, there were 6 jobs. Out of the 10 jobs in 2010, 6 of those jobs did not yet exist 6 years before. So jobs now are evolving, new jobs are being created, and old jobs are dying as we go into different kinds of manufacturing. And I think more and more the computer technology is being used. Cars now are more computer assisted, and people are talking already about computer on wheels. And this is the car of the future. It will be more of a computer than anything else. And therefore, if we need to catch these jobs, we will really need people who are good in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, all the so-called STEM. Now, based on this, therefore, because of the fast-changing horizon of business, we also have to talk about social safety nets, because there will be people who will be left behind. It's something that sometimes we are all feeling sorry about. But at the same time, we cannot just wring our hands and say, kawawa naman sila, what a pity, they cannot catch up. Or we cannot blame other people and say we cannot blame the system. Sometimes we really have to put it upon ourselves that we also have to make sure that we ourselves can be part of the system by being, by taking advantage of whatever opportunities there are to educate ourselves and not to drop out. Because sometimes some of the problems sometimes may not be in the environment, but sometimes the problems are within the family. I mean, I'm now going into the social aspects, you see, of human capital development. Sometimes there are family problems that affect human capital development, but then that is not something that APEC will talk about, but something perhaps which other bodies can handle. But for me in APEC, I'm here to really raise the flag on the new ways of doing things, the new ways in which manufacturing is done, and the possibility of new jobs taking over old jobs. Now, when it comes, of course, to building sustainable and resilient communities, many APEC economies do support putting up, for instance, something like a disaster warning center so that at least all of us can benefit from the technology that comes from here. Taiwan is, of course, like us, we're always typhoon prone, and Taiwan is doing something on, on disaster risk mitigation and management. And the Japanese are talking about resilient infrastructure. It's not just infrastructure as building back better, but I think what we're thinking of is from now on, the building code should really require resilient infrastructure so that whatever happens, whether we have a tsunami which is 10 meters high, it will survive. And all of this, of course, our baby, so to speak, during the SOM2 are the micro and small and medium enterprises, or the MSMEs. 2 days from now, the ministers related to trade will have their own meeting, and they will focus on the proposed Boracay action plan on medium, small, micro, small, and medium enterprises, which will capacitate these MSMEs so that they will have better access to finance. We're talking about microfinancing. But don't let me go into that because I'd like to reserve this discussion on the Boracay action plan on the MSMEs to the trade ministers who will be doing a special briefing on this. And so I think I have more or less covered all the issues that we have done. Oh, there's another one. We have also decided to discuss the internet and the digital economy. This is something that other people are still trying to grapple with. When we talk about the internet, we talk about the platform. Like, for instance, the mechanism. But when we talk about digital economy, we already think in terms of the data that's produced via internet. There's so much data being generated by all of these companies, even banks, insurance companies. They have this, what they call the big data. This can really be a good area that can be mined by many enterprises. Even as MSMEs can mine data from the global data, and they will see, for instance, what are the consumer preferences, what products are being, bought, and what products are not being bought. I mean, this will help them plan their own business strategies, and this will help them plan also design their new products. So the digital and internet economy is a new field that we're going to be discussing in the future. And this is, for some people, this might be an easy task, but for some of us, we're talking in terms of how much global data should be shared. Should we also be worried about security of data? Should we also be worried, for instance, then we will go into cyberspace attacks. We will go into, what people do in the internet, whether good or bad. I hope that the briefing that I have given you right now is enough to give you enough materials to to work on. I'm now open for the open forum for question and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We will now open the floor for questions. May we request that we limit the discussion to APEC-related topics only. May we also request that you state your name and the news organization you belong to before addressing your question.
Afternoon. My name is Yellow from China Central Television, and here I have two questions. The first one is focused about the FTAAP. I just want to know that in this SOM, what kind of achievement we have, and because we know right now the FTAAP is still in the strategic research
Yeah.
level. So what kind of challenges we
Okay.
still face?
They have come out with the terms of reference for the FTAAP study because we have somehow the big discussion was who should write the study and what chapter should be there. So they decided on the issues and who should write what. So I think if I may give you a general picture, the economists indicated that they want to be part, of course, of the study, and they will say they will be part of the drafting of the study, and of course they will also be working with academicians on how we can get data. Remember, whenever we do things in APEC, we always work with data. And if data is not available, it's so hard to do policies without data. So we're very data-oriented. It's the gathering of data now that we are thinking of, and we're also thinking of the best people who can draft the study so that later on we can come up with something concrete, and then we can say, this is what we have discovered, and therefore this is how we will start our negotiations. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. And the second question is about what's your comment on China's role, China's contribution in this SOM2?
Okay. We covered 3 topics that were started by China as host here, and I call them Beijing mandate. In fact, when we took over hosting of APEC from China, we agreed to do for China the following things. 1, we agreed to do the terms of reference on urbanization. The reason is that there's a big problem in China on big cities, the pollution, the air pollution, the water pollution. So we did the terms of reference there, and we decided to do what we call an APEC program to handle the challenges of urbanization. And this will include local executives so that they will form a network and we can all come up with policies that will somehow guide big cities to improve themselves and also guide big towns as they become big cities. The other one is the study on the FTAAP, as I told you. The other one is the terms of reference on the formation of a group that will really study the internet and digital economy, which I said is also quite important. You see, if you notice, we're already moving towards things that are beyond goods. When you talk about the internet and the digital economy, it's not something you can hold in your hands. It's the same thing also for services. You cannot hold that anymore. So these are the things that we're discussing about right now. And I think for some people, if you listen to our discussions, for people who are used to thinking in terms of trade in goods, they will see that we hardly discuss goods anymore, unless these goods are environmental goods. That means they should contribute to the improvement of the environment, or they should not add to the degradation of the environment. So those are the 3 things that we did with China, the 3 initiatives of China. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We can take the next question now.
I hope I did not go too fast in the briefing. Okay?
Nia
Yeah.
Kalia from the Inquirer. Ma'am, can you give us details how ready is the Philippines for the free trade area in the region? I mean, for TPP, we are not yet. We cannot yet. We're
Again?
not ready to join. But for the FTAAP, how ready is the
Oh.
Philippines?
I think as ready as the average APEC member, because If you look at the TPP, there are 12 members. We are 21. That means 9 are not there. But even among the 12, there are a couple, 2 or 3 of them, who say that they see the negotiations also as challenging to them because they have to do some domestic law uh, changes. Um, Vietnam will have to do its own. Even Malaysia has to do some, legislative changes. So it's not as though if you're in TPP or outside of it, it's not as though how ready are you or how not ready are you. Definitely, for me, whether you go into TPP or not, you have to be ready somehow because at the rate things are changing in the economic world, you cannot afford not to be ready, even if you're not a member of FTAAP, because the reason is that it will mean less investments coming in or even less jobs coming in. Corporations they think with money. They are not going to invest in a country just because they want to help you. They want to go to an economy which is very efficient and where costs of doing business are low and when there is ease of doing business. So if these are our objectives on how we can make things easier for them, less choke points, and we have the right human capital to do the production, whatever they're doing. And if we are, if we have those protection, for instance, of the processes, definitely we will attract these people.
Our next question, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Leoneline Artes from Bomboradio, Philippines, Bomboradio, Calibo. Ma'am, my question is, you said earlier that some investors doesn't invest on us because of we don't have strong intellectual property.
I said some investors do not invest in an economy that do not have a strong intellectual property regime.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how about on the Philippines, ma'am? So how can we cope up on that issues? Because I know that there are some discriminations because of because of some issues that Filipinos, not generally, ma'am, they don't make some, yung sinasabing walang originality, ganito, ganyan. So, how can we cope up on that issues and through APEC cooperation
Okay.
and initiatives, ma'am?
Okay, paraphrase your question, please. You say that we cannot cope with originality, or are we original but we don't have intellectual property protection?
Yes, ma'am. How can we cope on issues that arise that merong nangyari kasi, ma'am, na yung impression is Filipinos don't have originality. So, paano natin yan ma-cope up through
Well,
APEC?
human capital development. Everything boils down to human capital development. As I have said before, we cannot compete unless we capacitate ourselves. For me, the bottom line is how educated is our workforce, how educated is our population. We just have to look at our educational statistics. How many of us drop out after 6 years? And how many of us go into innovation courses? Some of us would rather go into simple courses, right? How many of us really go into what we call the STEM courses, the science courses, technological, engineering, and mathematics? If you just look at the statistics of CHED, the number of graduates in this field is so little. And for me, that's something that we should address. And I'm glad that the Department of Education has added to the contact hours in the classroom in the fields of science and math. We cannot just say, are we creative? Yes, we are creative in the arts, but are we creative in the sciences and engineering? I think that's something that I cannot say much about, but I do know we have creativity in the arts. But when we're talking about creativity here, they're talking about products, the smartphone, the Androids, the smart bracelets, the smart cars. Do we have creativity in these fields? So iba eh. Because sometimes when we think of creativity, we think of our dancers, our singers, our animators. That's a different field. We also have the creative arts, but I'm talking of the innovative fields that are really hard science and hard technology. And this is where the wealth comes from, because these are the products that you're going to sell. I mean, if you just have to look at Samsung, how many mobile phones did it sell that made it so big that somehow it overtook HTC of Taiwan? And look at the tablets, the iPads, how many are being sold, how many are competing. At one point, I even asked, where is Nokia now? Nokia was overtaken, right? You hardly see anybody using Nokia now because of innovation. And these are the things that we're talking about, because these are the products that create wealth in the modern world. But then at the same time, I don't want you to think that I'm just thinking of the 21st century in terms of science and technology. You also have to think in terms of agriculture. Agriculture is very basic for us. But how many of us are really taking the researches of our agricultural scientists seriously so that we can increase our yield per hectareage, we can have more resilient products, that our rice stalks will not easily be felled by floods, that our fruits do not easily rot, that our, everything that we produce from the land can compete with other products, and that the shelf life is also long. This, again, is innovation and competition. This is also science. Last time when I briefed you, three days ago, I talked about agricultural services as being science-based. It should really be science-based. We cannot carry on anymore the traditions of our forefathers. With climate change now, the more we need to research on the viability of our agricultural products and how can they survive longer rains or longer drought. That is the challenge in agriculture. Okay? So I'm going from industry to agriculture here. And again, it is human capital development. Okay.
Perhaps you could take the last. Okay, next question, please.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Amy from Inquirer. I just want to clarify about the liberalization of services you mentioned a while ago. Does this just pertain to the services rendered by, labor force, or do you also were there also discussions regarding liberalization of services sectors, and during any time during the
Okay.
Post-SOM?
For some people, they have a fear for the term liberalization and access. I think when they say liberalization, meaning, let me see, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, I'll give something very concrete. Let us say that let's say we want to develop more people who are very good in high-tech engineering. Okay, this is just in the field of engineering. And let us say we want to have more people who will be able to help have better engineers just in the field of electrical or mechanical engineering. To teach in college, any decent college, you need a PhD in engineering. Do the statistics. How many Filipinos have PhDs in engineering?
Very few.
Maybe 25, maybe 50. Assuming we have 50 or let's say we have 50 or 100 PhDs in engineering, how many engineering schools do we have? And all of these engineering schools need PhDs in engineering. Because we don't have that, because we don't have the necessary faculty to teach our engineers, we cannot level up our engineering education, so to speak. And this is where I think we should liberalize. We should allow foreign engineers with PhDs to come to our universities to teach us, even if it's just for a module, even if it's just for a month, so that later on, our own students can be, can be exposed to the new researches in engineering. I know of a university in Virginia because I lived in the United States for 6 years when I was assigned in Washington, D.C. I was monitoring the College of Engineering of the University of Virginia, and I was monitoring the textbooks. They were changing their textbooks on that particular subject every 2 years because new discoveries happen every time and new processes are discovered every time. So every 2 years they change their textbooks. And sometimes the writer of the textbook is a professor himself in the College of Engineering, the University of Virginia. Do we have that in the Philippines? Sometimes our textbooks are 4 years old when maybe whatever is taught there, the new procedures, are already being discarded by other advanced colleges. I'm just talking of something which I have experienced personally. This is just in the field of educational services. I'm not talking about other services yet. Okay.
Ma'am,
Okay, thank you.
I think one more question, sorry. In the ASEAN, we also have, I think, something that can maybe allow the flow of workers across the region. Is there a move for APEC to do something
No.
similar?
APEC is something higher than workers' mobility. We're really looking at policies that will make us more dynamic. The objective of APEC really is not just to create growth or to improve growth, but really to make growth dynamic, because we cannot remain on a static level. And sometimes some of us forget that economic growth is beyond beyond buildings. It's what the human does for a job. You might have all this modern structure, but you look at the quality of jobs that come in and the quality of human resources that we have. That's why even our own Filipino industrialists, they talk about skills gaps. A member of ABAC, of the APEC Business Advisory Council, said that for industries like them, their main problem really is looking for people with talent. They said they don't lack applicants. There are a lot of applicants, but the applicants are not those that they need, and they are not the ones that have the talent that they need. So we really have to talk with the industry leaders and job providers to find out what they need, and then later on work backwards on our curriculum, or work forward and say, where can we improve our educational system, or where can we improve our training system, assuming we already have people who have graduated from college. How do we augment their training so that they are ready for these new jobs in the 21st century? Okay, any other question?
We can take one last question for our SOM chair.
Okay.
If none, okay. Thank you, Undersecretary
Thank you very
Del
much.
Rosario. This
Okay.
concludes our press briefing for this afternoon. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you very much. Okay.